What is going on, everybody? What is going on? The Catch fam. My name is John Dawson, and in today's video, we will be breaking down 5 must-start wide receivers moving into week 4 of the 2023 fantasy football season. If you guys are new here, this is all we do here all year round: free fantasy football content, redraft, dynasty, and best ball. If you guys are into that, be sure to subscribe on the way in. But most importantly, please get in the comment section down below anything that you guys need: starts, sits, waiver advice, trade advice, whatever it may be. Let me know down below. I will get back to you as soon as I possibly can. But let's not waste any more time. Let's hop right into today's video. All right, first on the list, I'm going to go with Michael Pittman. And, for the purpose of these videos, we're not talking about guys like Tyreek Hill or Devontae Adams. And, Pittman is probably going to be a must start for your roster regardless. But I do feel like we've gotten enough questions over the past couple weeks about Pittman as a flex option and even a wide receiver 2 option for rosters that he's definitely worth talking about for this style a video. Plus, where you drafted Pittman, I mean, he could realistically be your wide receiver 4 or 5, depending on your build. But I think we need to have a lot more confidence in Michael Pittman as this season continues. It did not matter last week that Gardner Minshew was a starter quarterback. I really like the volume Pittman was seeing from Anthony Richardson, but now we can kind of verify that it doesn't matter if it's Minshew or Richardson out there, because Pittman still had 11 targets in week 3, 9 receptions, 77 receiving yards for 16.7 fantasy points. He has hit double digits in full PPR every week of the season so far, and the volume has been great: 11 or more targets each game. And I mean, if you guys watch that game against the Ravens, he's playing like a grown man. One of the best catches of the entire season, maybe the best catch of the entire season, to essentially put the Colts in position to win that game against the Ravens. Pittman has been great. He's been consistent. I'm not worried about which quarterback is starting. I don't think the Rams are too much of a threat in terms of their secondary. Pittman has a good matchup in week 4, a better matchup in week 5 against the Tennessee Titans secondary that's been awful. So moving into week 4, Pittman is a player we can absolutely trust in the flex, and even as a wide receiver 2, he is a must start as we approach the coming week. All right, next on the list, I'm going to be talking about Cortland Sutton. And Sutton was a player that I really encourage you guys to go out and target and draft in the offseason. I told you guys, listen, this is not a high ceiling player, but he is a consistent player. He's going to get you at least 11 points on a weekly basis, someone you can trust in the flex for a safe floor play. And that's been exactly what he's been so far this season: 11 or more fantasy points in each game. But he's coming off of his best fantasy performance in week 3 against Miami, even fumbling twice in this game. He had 19.1 fantasy points, 11 targets, 8 receptions, 91 receiving yards, and a touchdown. Listen, the Broncos, the Bears facing each other in week 4. This feels like the battle of the 2 most disastrous teams in the NFL right now. Both of these defenses are in complete shambles. The Bears have just been getting ran all over, passed all over since week 1. And for crying out loud, the Denver Broncos just gave up the most points to an NFL team since 1966, giving up 70 points to the Miami Dolphins. And it could have been worse if the Dolphins elected to kick a field goal and set the all-time record for points at the end of the game. This defense is in shambles against the run and against the pass, but so is the Chicago Bears defense. This is going to be a game with a lot of points. I actually think that both Russell Wilson and maybe even Justin Fields can potentially bounce back in this game. Russell Wilson has had his moment so far this year. This passing attack for the Broncos, it's not necessarily great, but they're just playing from behind and in such bad positions that Russ has to throw the football. And like I said, Cortland Sutton has benefited from that so far on this season. And even Jerry Jeudy and Marvin Mims have to a degree, but Sutton has been the most consistent player at the wide receiver position. It's a great matchup. He's an easy flex play. He should be in our starting lineup. You're looking at your roster and Sutton's on your bench. I really think he's a solid play as we approach week 4. All right, next on the list, I'm going to go with Terry McLaurin of the Washington Commanders. And listen, I mean, this team is coming off a really bad performance in week 3. I mean, I think they were lucky that, Miami put up as many points on Denver as they did, because that kind of overshadowed everything throughout the weekend, even the Bears' disastrous loss to a degree. But nonetheless, I'm not incredibly worried about Washington in week 4. although they are playing against the Philadelphia Eagles in Philly. But listen, this Philly defense has been really bad against the pass and really bad against opposing wide receivers. So, like I already mentioned, I'm recording this before Monday Night Football is played. So we'll see how the Eagles look against the Bucks tonight. But with Godwin and Mike Evans and Baker actually looking pretty sharp, even Kate Otten looking pretty good, I expect the Eagles to not play so great in terms of their secondary. Go ahead and roast me in the comments if I'm wrong. But nonetheless, overall in the season, even if they have a good game, they have not been good against opposing wide receivers. And McLaurin is the clear cut wide receiver one on this team. Jahan Dotson has been absolutely quiet, an absolute complete disappointment so far on the season. And Curtis Samuel has had his moments, but no one has been as consistent as Terry McLaurin, who did have a poor week one against Arizona, but in week two put up 16.4 fantasy points playing against Pat Surtain. And then last week against Buffalo, 6 targets, 6 receptions, 41 receiving yards, and 10 fantasy points. So kind of similar to Cortland Sutton. Like, we're not going to get a massive ceiling out of this play, but if you have McLaurin on your roster, I do think you should have confidence. I don't think we should look at this Philadelphia matchup and just say, oh, I can't start Terry McLaurin. I mean, like I just said, he scored against Pat Surtain. And I mean, as bad as the Broncos defense is, Pat Surtain is arguably the best corner in the league. So, yeah, Washington's going to be visiting Philadelphia, but don't be worried. Terry McLaurin is a very good start, a must-start flex option moving into week 4 of the season. All right, next up on the list, I'm going to go with Tank Dell of the Houston Texans. He gets a really soft matchup against the Pittsburgh Steelers, who are still ranking in the bottom 12 against the wide receiver position. They just got absolutely torched by Devontae Adams. I mean, don't get me wrong, this Steelers defense has its playmakers, but they're all in the front 7. This secondary throughout the years played very, very poor. And I will admit, I was kind of struggling with which Texans wide receiver to go with here. I do like Nico Collins in this matchup, and I do think Robert Woods could play quite well. I mean, CJ Stroud is just ripping the football all over the field. So we know that there is going to be plenty of volume all around for all 3 wide receivers. And I just think Tank Dell is the player who brings the most upside to the table. Okay. 20 fantasy points in week 2, 25.5 in week 3 against Jacksonville. A much better secondary on paper than the Pittsburgh Steelers. He had 7 targets, 5 receptions, 145 receiving yards, 29 yards per catch, and a touchdown. Listen, this chemistry between CJ Stroud and Tank Dell, both in their rookie season, I think is just going to continue to progress throughout the year. So, I mean, there's going to be a little bit of risk. Like, maybe the Texans at some point in the season come back to earth. Maybe Stroud starts making some mistakes, whatever it may be. Or maybe these guys are just going to be consistent all year round, and we need to go ahead and accept that fact and take advantage of it. But here in week 4 against a soft secondary of the Pittsburgh Steelers, I don't see any reason why Tank Dell should not be considered a must-start flex option. Like I said, really like Nico Collins, and I think in deeper leagues, Bobby Trees is worth starting as well. But hey, if you own Tank Dell, he's a great upside play, a must-start wide receiver moving into week 4. All right, last on the list, I'm going to go ahead and make an argument for Joshua Palmer being a very strong start approaching week 4. So, unfortunately, we have lost Mike Williams for the entire season. I mean, yeah, I never want to see a player go down. It's really unfortunate. I wish him a speedy recovery, but is it really a fantasy football season without a Mike Williams injury? I mean, it just is what it is. But nonetheless, Josh Palmer is the next man up. Quentin Johnson is going to be a player to heavily monitor because he more so resembles Mike Williams' style of play, where Josh Palmer kind of resembles Keenan Allen's style of play. So there is some stuff to keep an eye on here, but nonetheless, it's a really good matchup in week 4 against the Las Vegas Raiders at home. This Chargers team, they're 1-2 now after week 3. They still need to rack up some victories, especially against a soft divisional opponent. And, when you look at the Raiders defense, which is really not good at all outside of maybe Max Crosby, of course, they're going to have to put all of their defensive pressure on Keenan Allen, who is absolutely balling out. I mean, the man has had 14 or more fantasy points through the first 3 games of the season, 31 or more fantasy points in 2 of those games. I mean, they have to absolutely account for Keenan Allen coming off a game where he just had 20 targets and 215 receiving yards for crying out loud. So, like I said, we might see Quentin Johnson come into that role of what Mike Williams does, but I think this is a really good opportunity for Josh Palmer because there's just no way that he is not going to be open on some plays. Because, like I said, the Raiders are going to have to worry about Keenan Allen this entire game. So, with Mike Williams out last week, 14.6 fantasy points for Josh Palmer, 7 targets, 4 receptions, 66 receiving yards, a touchdown, 16.5 yards per catch, some good marks overall. 769 receiving yards, 3 touchdowns last year. So he has enough chemistry with Justin Herbert. He had to step up at times last year when Keenan Allen and Mike Williams were hurt. So don't get me wrong, I don't see a crazy high ceiling here, but I just think this is a good opportunity for a wide receiver who's going to have to step up, and he's going up against a very soft Raiders secondary. So I like Josh Palmer as a solid flex option. And with how many injuries we've seen across the board so far this season, I think Josh Palmer is going to be a player a lot of you guys might have to consider. Don't be afraid to throw him into your flex. I think he's a very strong start moving into week 4. And that'll do it for today's video. If you guys did enjoy the content today, this is all we do here all year round. Free fantasy football content, redraft, dynasty, and best ball. If you guys are into that, be sure to subscribe on the way out. But more importantly, please get in the comment section down below any questions, any thoughts, any concerns you guys have moving into week 4 of the 2023 fantasy football season. Let me know down below, and I'll get back to you as soon as I possibly can. And with that, I will say, thank you guys so much for watching and or listening. And remember, you saw it here on The Catch.